When I started working on the non-GMO project in 2006, there was a real risk of us losing non-GMO genetics for commodities like corn and soy, and consumers were pretty much unaware of GMOs. Fast forward to now, when the non-GMO market is a $40 billion industry, and the butterfly is in every grocery store in the country, and it's easy to think we've got the GMO issue under control. But over the past few years, the biotechnology industry and GMO landscape have evolved really rapidly. There's been an explosion in startup companies using new GMO techniques to create ingredients and products. Genetic engineering is no longer just about a few ag giants manipulating a handful of commodity crops. It's now also about engineering animals and ingredients brewed in vats in warehouses. These techniques, such as RNAi and CRISPR, are easier and less expensive, with faster turnaround from development to product release. Because these new products are created with new genetic engineering techniques, we're also seeing developers basically try to manipulate the market by claiming that the products are non-GMO. This is completely unscientific and inaccurate, and it's causing a lot of confusion. Most importantly, these new GMOs are largely unregulated. Today, we'll take a closer look at each of these aspects. My intent is to alert you to this new GMO landscape because a lot of these products are already entering the supply chain. I want to provide you with the resources to keep your products non-GMO so that you can reliably continue to offer consumers the natural choices they want. When we first started bringing attention to GMOs, we were really just talking about a handful of biotech companies and a few commodity crops, which were basically engineered for just two traits. One, herbicide tolerance, and two, insect resistance. Today, though, we are monitoring over 460 companies developing new GMOs. And that's a nearly 300% increase in just 5 years. So that number just keeps getting higher. And also the purposes for these companies have broadened. So traditionally, we've been concerned with the main cash crops: corn, soy, canola, and cotton. I know you're all familiar with those. These GMOs are transgenic. Transgenic means that DNA from one species is inserted into the genome of another and left there. And these crops have been the GMO poster children of big ag. Today, in addition to those traditional transgenic GMOs, new products of gene editing are really changing the biotechnology landscape. Animals are being engineered with human DNA for medical purposes, but then that meat is being approved for human consumption without sufficient clarity on segregation and traceability. Microbes are being engineered to produce a blood-like substance for burgers, which was sold to consumers before the FDA even deemed it safe for humans to eat. Goats are being engineered to produce spider silk for cosmetics, and these examples really are just the tip of the iceberg. GMOs are now entering the market as meat, fruits and veggies, flavorings, colorings, fragrances, dairy proteins, probiotics, plant-based alternatives, cosmetics, body care, silk, vitamins, and lots of other ingredients and inputs. So basically, virtually every grocery aisle is being impacted. There's Brave Robot ice cream, there's the Impossible Burger, and there's Unilever moisturizers in the cosmetics aisle. These products are being made with all kinds of new biotechnology techniques. Those techniques include RNAi, synthetic biology, which you might have also heard referred to as synbio, TALEN, ODM, ZFN, CRISPR. Most of these methods do still involve the use of foreign DNA, but the foreign DNA isn't always left inside the genome. And so that means that the finished products sometimes aren't considered transgenic. And some of the new methods actually don't involve foreign DNA at all. So the technique we've seen the biggest explosion in is synthetic biology, or synbio. In the marketplace, that typically means the engineering of microorganisms in order to create a product, such as a flavoring. By genetically modifying the microbes, what developers are doing is exploiting what the microbes do and essentially turn them into tiny factories. So in that way, those genetically engineered microbes can turn vats of corn into products like sweeteners, vanilla, and collagen, or really just about anything. Because many of the new GMOs are not transgenic, the biotech industry is selling them into the supply chain as non-GMO. They're saying that because they're not transgenic, they're non-GMO. This is both unscientific and it's really out of touch with consumer expectations. What's more is that the US government has largely decided to not regulate most of these new GMOs, and that means that biotech companies don't have to reveal the true nature of what they're selling. Another challenge is that currently there are no commercially available tests to distinguish products of new GMOs, although work is being done on that front. These challenges mean GMOs can easily enter the supply chain unnoticed if we're not united about keeping them out. So, what do we know about consumer expectations? Fortunately, against this backdrop, consumers still want non-GMO choices. And it's not just the natural and organic shoppers anymore. In 2019, we conducted an extensive market study with the Linkage research firm, and their results showed that 1 in every 3 shoppers prefers non-GMO choices, and that 64% of all North American shoppers are even willing to pay more for non-GMO options. The Hartman Group found that 65% believe GMO labeling should be mandatory, and the Pew Research Center says that nearly 40% of consumers consider GMOs unsafe to eat. Consumers have always wanted GMO transparency, as many of you know. It's no longer just about knowing what's in their food, though. Based on a recent online survey we conducted, consumer concerns regarding GMOs extend to farmers' rights, food security, social equity, and the loss of biodiversity. New GMOs are largely unregulated, unlabeled, and they're often sold as non-GMO. Yet the bottom line is that consumers are concerned about GMOs, whether the GMOs were grown in a field or grown in a vat. So let's talk about how they're entering the supply chain. Due to the lack of transparency, new GMOs can and are slipping into the food system unnoticed. One example of this came with Impossible Foods. In 2014, Impossible Foods submitted evidence to the FDA for the safety of its heme. Heme is the blood-like substance that makes their burger bleed. And heme is created through the genetic engineering of microorganisms. Again, that's the technique known as synbio. So the FDA allows the companies to self-determine which evidence they want to submit for these reviews, which is obviously concerning in and of itself. But as it was reviewing Impossible Foods paperwork, the FDA actually noticed that the company hadn't examined about 40 proteins in its heme. In 2015, the FDA allowed Impossible Foods to withdraw their petition and resubmit at a later time. Yet in 2016, Impossible decided to go ahead and release its burger to the public via restaurants, allowing consumers to eat it, all the while knowing that the FDA had concerns over those unexamined proteins. At no time did Impossible Foods or the FDA make consumers aware that the product had not yet been recognized as safe to eat. And actually, the public only found out about the FDA's concerns after a watchdog group filed a Freedom of Information Act request, exposing the fact a whole year later. This lack of government oversight has other serious consequences as well. And one is the potential for off-target effects. Off-target effects are unintended or accidental changes made to the DNA during the editing process. So because the companies submit their own safety evaluations, they're usually just focused only on the desired result of the GMO. So they're just looking to see, is the change that they engineered it for happening. And they're not looking for anything else. So that means that if off-target effects happen, they can go unnoticed because neither the company nor the government is looking for them. And that's exactly what happened with Bury the hornless bull. Bury was created in a lab using the gene editing technique Talon to prevent him from growing horns. Bury's maker, Recombinetics, was seeking a development partner, and they reached out to the Brazilian government to together create a whole herd of hornless cows. So Brazil regulates transgenic GMOs, but Bury was supposed to be non-transgenic. In 2018, however, scientists at the FDA were working on a totally unrelated data exercise, and they decided to use the hornless cow's DNA as a test case. Much to their surprise, they discovered some interesting new things in the cow's DNA. During the gene editing process, the cow had accidentally retained a bit of bacterial DNA. Not only was this an off-target effect that the company had missed, but it also now rendered the cow a transgenic GMO and subject to regulation in Brazil. This was an off-target effect that was really caught by total accident. If it hadn't been caught, those cows could have entered the supply chain and their products possibly sold into the food system to unwitting brands and consumers. Off-target effects are just a reality with gene editing because it's imprecise and it can have unpredictable results. In addition to these challenges, the USDA has explicitly stated that it will not regulate new gene editing technologies, saying that they fall outside their scope of review. So that means that brands and consumers have no regulatory agency looking out for them on that front. At the non-GMO Project, we believe ingredients made from synbio, which is that process that uses genetically engineered microbes, are probably the biggest concern for the natural products industry at this time. Synbio is used to create flavorings like vanilla, as well as colorants, CBD, collagen, plant-based proteins, dairy proteins, vitamins, probiotics. All of these are slipping into the food supply without regulation. And brands are often unaware that they're buying these GMO ingredients. So how do we at the non-GMO Project know all this? We have a full-time research team that tracks the biotech industry daily. They've created the world's most comprehensive knowledge and database on the development and commercialization of GMOs. We devote an incredible amount of time and effort to this tracking. As you'll recall, it used to be that we were keeping an eye on just a handful of GMO commodity crops. That was a lot easier. Today, we're monitoring all of those 464 biotech companies we mentioned. Our team has a really comprehensive system for tracking the activity of the industry. This flowchart simplifies the process. Basically, our resources include government databases, regulatory data, articles, scientific papers, websites, patents, Security and Exchange Commission filings, monographs, event talks, marketing presentations, investor presentations, legal documents, business profiles, financial reports, and more. We follow the development of new GMOs every step of the way, from inception through trial, promotion, regulatory approval when that's even applicable, and commercialization right up to when they enter the supply chain. Every quarter, the team publishes an internal 350-page biotechnology monitoring report so that we can meticulously track GMOs entering the marketplace, even when they're being sold as non-GMO. And we do all of this to maintain the integrity of our rigorous standard. The research gives brands the confidence that with the butterfly, they can meet consumers' high expectations and maintain their trust. Using the data in this unparalleled biotechnology monitoring research, we know the right questions to ask in our product verification program, or PVP, and what developments to keep an eye on within the biotech industry. And all of that supports our mission to ensure that consumers have true access to non-GMO choices. Let's talk a little bit about the funders. So to really understand the scale of this new GMO landscape, it helps to know who's funding the biotech industry. You have your traditional players like the US government and agrochemical companies. But now there are also a bunch of Silicon Valley venture capitalists who are funding startups, and that's really accelerating the growth of the industry. These include founders from Facebook, PayPal, Google, and the Gates Foundation, and there's also significant foreign investment in biotechnology. And as biotech companies promote their new methods, they're making all kinds of flashy marketing claims about sustainability and co-opting the moral high ground through greenwashing. So for example, Impossible Foods markets its plant-based burgers as sustainable, but its main protein source is traditional commodity crop GMO soy, the monocropping of which obviously harms biodiversity. In addition, big ag either completely ignore or co-opt regenerative practices. But meanwhile, local farmers and producers who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color are totally left out of the conversations. And the ramifications for major food-producing regions, such as those in the global South, are wholly ignored. A lot of these companies are startups that want access to natural and organic consumers, to your shoppers. They're using non-GMO marketing claims to mislead consumers into buying the very technology consumers don't want, GMOs. So the landscape is changing rapidly, and that is why we're watching it so closely. Our expertise allows us to pursue our mission, and it lets us provide you with the confidence you need to know that you're meeting consumer expectations amid this complexity. We're also working hard to keep you informed. So we encourage you to sign up for our new GMO Alerts newsletter that we just started a few months ago. Every month it tells you about new GMOs entering the marketplace, including which companies are using them. If you're a brand, know the right questions to ask of your ingredient suppliers. Things like, do you have a GMO avoidance policy? And make sure that you're sourcing from non-GMO Project verified suppliers. For this presentation, we put together a webpage with educational materials, including a list of questions you can ask, and also some words to look out for that can indicate the use of GMOs. So make sure you visit that page afterward. At the same time that many GMOs are slipping into grocery stores without regulation or even awareness, consumers actually increasingly want non-GMO choices. We're committed to providing consumers with the most trustworthy third-party standard for avoiding GMOs. We know that consumers prefer brands that articulate their values and stand for something. To shoppers, the butterfly represents transparency and a better, more natural food system. This remains our mission, and we hope you'll continue to partner with us. Thank you so much.